Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video where we will be painting our first portrait. Now in this video I'll keep it really basic and really simple for you to follow along, and as you can see I've already got my image printed out. This image will be available in the description for you to print out, so I've gone to my local office workshop or my local printers and just printed this out on an A2 piece of paper at about 160 GSM, and you can see it's got all my lines sort of ticked out and all my eyes, nose, all my basic features for me to follow along with. Along with that, I've also printed out my reference image. So what we'll be painting is just an image of Miles Davis, and the reason why I've chosen this image is because it's fairly simple but also got enough detail in there for you to develop some good understanding of how to paint eyes and nose and really develop the form of the image. So in part one of this video, what we'll be doing is just building up the basic tonal structure of this image, and then once we've done that, we'll come back in part two and I'll teach you how to do all the details and skin textures and really lift this image up and develop the form even further to try and create a really realistic sort of image of this painting. So along with that, I've also mixed up three colors. So I've got a grey, black and white. And with the grey, it's just a 50% grey, so the best way to do that is probably about half black, half white, and then try to find a reference image on maybe Google or something like that. Just type in 50% grey and try to match it to that as closely as you can. So once you've printed this, feel free to follow along and see how you go. Let's get started. Okay, so for painting today, what I'll be using is a Iwata HP BCS, and I'll be painting at about 30 psi. So once you've got your mid-grey mixed up and you're ready to start painting, what we'll do first is we'll layer some grey over the whole painting, which will serve as our base. And the reason why we do that is to fog out a lot of these lines, but also if we make a mistake, we'll have our grey and we can always come back and fix it up if we need to. So let's get started. Once we've laid down our grey base, you'll notice that the paper buckles quite a fair bit because we've just put down so much paint, and the paper is just so oversaturated. But once the paper starts to dry and the paint starts drying, what will happen is the paper will start to stretch out and flatten out quite a fair bit. So that's why I've actually put tape all the way around my artwork, and make sure you do the same when you put your artwork on the board as well. So let's just wait for this to dry before we start putting down our black. If you want to speed the process up a little bit faster, you can definitely grab a hairdryer and get the paper to dry out that way. So now that our paper's flattened off a fair bit, I think I'm going to start with my black now and work my way around the outside just to keep it simple and easy to start off with. So just looking at our reference image, we might want to make sure that around the forehead we keep it nice and soft, and as we work around the sides here, it also looks quite soft and gradual, so we really want to capture that and keep our airbrush a fair distance away from the canvas. So to start off with, I'll probably start at about 15 centimeters and slowly build up my tones, especially around the forehead, and just go stroke by stroke. So it also helps if you tilt your airbrush at a certain angle. So for here I'll be going at about 45 degrees just to help with that gradation across the forehead. And then slowly I'll just work my way down through past the eye, down the cheekbone, and down towards the lips. So you probably can't see the dotted lines anymore, but I've basically just worked my gradation just past the actual edge, just the line, so my black is covering it, and from the dotted line you can see I've just gone past that with my gradation. So you can see I'm holding my airbrush a fair distance away from the paper, and that's so I can actually get a really nice gradation without it being too patchy. And down the side of the artwork you want to make sure that your black is 100%, and then just where the line is you just make it really soft. Okay, now once we reach the lips, down here you can see on the image, and make sure we keep looking at our image to make sure we're doing the right thing. Over here we could probably go a little bit softer, and down here at the lips the edge looks fairly sharp all the way through. So down here I'll probably get a fair bit closer, so maybe 5 to 10 centimeters, just to make sure the lines get a bit sharper, not 100% sharp, but just sharp enough to get that really clean edge there. So I'll probably work my way through the lips now, and maybe soften off the cheek just a little bit. So when I soften off my cheek, with my trigger I'm only pulling it back maybe 2 or 3 millimeters, not even a quarter of the way, and really slowly building up those tones, going backwards and forwards over it. Okay, now I'm going to go over the lips and get them really nice and close. So as you can see there, just to get that really nice control, I held my airbrush with both hands, and then I slowly moved it backwards and forwards along the line and slowly built up that line. I wasn't trying to get it in one go because that's really difficult, and you can get a really nice line just by building it up slowly and getting those tones on nicely. And here what I'm going to do, just to build up the black under the lip, I'm going to make sure I tilt my airbrush down just so I don't get any overspray on that bottom lip. I really want to keep that nice and grey because you can see it's fairly bright in the image. So I want the black right below that lip, so make sure you tilt your airbrush down to where you want the overspray to go. Now when you build up your blacks, don't go too heavy with it. Really make sure you build them up fairly gradually, because if you oversaturate the paper, you can get spiders and you can get really blotchy effects. So make sure you build that up fairly slowly. So on this side of the paper, I'm going to do exactly the same thing through the cheekbone up here, past the eye, and up to the forehead, and do exactly the same thing we've done through here. Now to get a really nice gradient through the top here, what I'm doing is I'm lifting my airbrush a fair distance away from the painting and really pulling the trigger back maybe halfway. Alright, now the next area I'm going to work in is probably the nose here. So you can see here, just looking at a painting, it's got a fairly consistent edge almost all the way around, whereas on the sides, well, actually on the sides it's much sharper, but on the top it's fairly soft, so around there I'll probably go 10 centimeters back from my paper, and then along the bottom it's fairly soft as well. So to start off with, I'll probably just use my hand as a mask. If you're not comfortable using your hands, you can use a piece of paper or cut a stencil. But just to get a fairly sharp line there, I'm just gonna use my hand and basically just do a dot. And on the other side, I'm gonna do the same. And then from there, I'm gonna block in the rest of this shape. Okay, now once you've got this main shape blocked in, the next major shape I'll get in blocked in is just above the eye. These big eyebrow shapes here. Those large triangle sort of shapes just above the eye, like his eyebrows. Let's get those blocked in and we should see our portrait really taking shape now.
So even for the lines above the eyebrows, I'm keeping my airbrush a fair distance back. This also makes it much easier to paint as well, but also the lines on the painting are all fairly soft through that area.
Alright, now that that's done, what I'm going to do is start painting some of these really tricky lines just through the eyes here and start getting those shapes in. So just following the lines on your artwork, you can see these two lines here. What I'm going to do is fill in between those with black. Well, no, actually I've made a mistake. Looking at my reference image, I've just noticed that that line should be just a little bit higher, and we should fill in the shape below it with black. So the beauty of having a grey base is now we can just go back with our grey and actually fix up my little mistake. So we'll just cover this black. With my mid grey, and let's just cover it up quite nicely. So what we'll do now is we'll come in below and fill in that black shape, and then where the dotted lines are, we'll do our black line through there, and that should get our image looking much nicer. So for the eyes now, with the eyes the details are much sharper through there, so we want to come in fairly close and get our lines a bit sharper through there. So let's get in nice and close. Now you can see here I actually got a few tiny little spiders through there, but to be honest I'm not too fussed about that, because when you look at the image it's got so much texture and detail through there that little mistakes or imperfections like that actually add to the artwork. So as I say, it's just a happy accident, I guess. And then where the dotted line is, I'll just put in another black line through there, which will be much trickier, but just take your time and slowly build it up, and just try to get your arm movement correct first. And make sure when you're painting you keep looking backwards and forwards between your reference image and your image, because that is essentially your roadmap and tells you where these lines are supposed to go and where to fade them out and where to connect them. So I can see here, just looking at my reference image, this point needs to come down just a tiny little bit. And that's most of that area blocked in. Now you can see some lines in there for the eye, well, the iris of the eye. So you can do that one of two ways. You can actually use a stencil for that, or you can freehand it, depending on what's easier for you and what makes it more comfortable. I'm just going to freehand it and just go really slow and really light and slowly build it up. Now for the bottom area of the eye, you can see that it is very sharp through there, so we definitely need a stencil through there. There's a few ways you can do it. Cutting a stencil would definitely be the best. Personally, I've always just used my hands for stencils because I like getting my hands dirty, I guess. So the way I do it is I'll just find an area of my hand that suits the shape really well and just slowly build up a sharp line through there. Alright, and then down here you can see some dotted lines through there, and what that's referring to is just that little shadow under his eye. Just to lift his bags under his eyes, I guess. So what we'll do there is we'll tilt our airbrush almost at a 45-degree angle and just pull it back just very gradually and just slowly build that up. Maybe I'll airbrush upside down just so you can see what I'm doing here. So you can see my airbrush is tilted, and then slowly I'll pull it directly away from the artwork. So you can see how I sort of slowly just built up that gradual stroke through there. And then down here you can see this line that goes up towards the nose. We'll put that one in as well. So you can see some reference lines referring to that, and then we'll do exactly the same thing there, just tilting our airbrush and pulling it away from the artwork. And as you pull away, you slowly pull the trigger back just to slowly build up that tone. It's a bit difficult. There we go. And then just above the nostrils of the nose, we can see a sharp line there. We'll put that in there. We can see a line referring to that. So we'll just put a hand as a stencil there, and then just basically put a dot in there. And then coming down the sides of the bridge of the nose, we can also see a bit of dark shadow in through there. So we just put that in as well, using the exact same method where we just pull our airbrush away from the paper and slowly pulling our trigger back and building up the tone. So as you can see, I do it over 3 or 4 strokes, just slowly building up the tone until I think it looks right. So with that, I probably went a little bit too dark. I overdid it there, but that's okay. We can come back in with a grey and fog that out and make it a bit lighter as well. That's the benefit of working on a nice mid-grey base. And then at the top here, we've got some creases going up towards the forehead. These ones are much smaller, so we get in a bit closer and try it that way. And then I think the only thing missing is just a bit of a shadow across the lip here. And another highlight shadow coming just across the, in between the nostril and the bridge of the nose. And this one's super light. I'll try to go really light with this one. think that's pretty much the left side of our portrait mostly blocked in. So now I'll just do exactly the same thing on the right, and we should be able to come in with our whites, highlights, and we'll be almost done. Okay, now I'm pretty happy with my black and my grays here now, so I'm gonna just put some white on my airbrush now and start putting in some of the highlights. So I'll probably just start with the nose and just paint a white basic line on the nose, just going up and down, fairly even and consistent, essentially just making a line on his nose. So let's just start here. And remember, pulling the trigger back very slowly and just a tiny little bit. And here I've got my airbrush maybe a hand span away from the painting and just slowly building it up. You can see just looking at a reference image that the nose highlight is very bright, so we can build it up a bit more. And you can really start to see our painting sort of starting to take shape here with our midtones, shadows and highlights. So now we've got the nose in. I think the next one in will be just the forehead here. So I'll do the same thing here, just putting in a line and then gradually just fading it out there. So the way I do that is just pulling my airbrush away. And then just beside those, we've also got some more highlights through there. So I'll do the same thing, but just on an angle, going in this direction. And the same on the other side. So I think the next highlight we can tackle is maybe the one just above the top lip there. And just to keep that top lip line sharp, maybe we'll just put our hand in with a stencil. And we can sort of let that highlight go up towards the nose a little bit and start to form some of these ridges. I think that's enough there. And then on his cheeks, he's also got some highlights going through there. So what I'll do there is just a bit of a dot through there. So I'll just start with a fairly large dot, about a handspan away. Basically just fogging it in there, and the same on the other side. And then, once we've done that, we can sort of slowly connect that to the base of to the corner of the eye as well. But very, very lightly, so maybe 25% of the opacity of white. And doing the same on the other side as well. Okay, now let's get on to some of the trickier areas. And maybe let's do the highlights of the eyes and some of the whites of the eyes as well. So when we come in here, we want to use our stencil again, or in my case, my finger. And here we don't want to go 100% white. The white of the eyes is never exactly 100%, so we just want to maybe make it 50% and slowly build it up. And then to do the whites of the eyes, that's probably the trickiest part. So just getting really close and then just paint a small little dot. Once that's done, and we'll do the same on the other side. So what I'm doing here is fixing up the white on the eyes, because you can see that they have a certain relationship to each other. So that one was probably a bit too high. You want to make sure that they have the same angle and the same distance to each other, because they're probably referencing the same lights in terms of the actual photo. So at this stage, I think the only thing I need to do now is go over the lips a little bit. So here, what I'll do is the same thing, just go over with the white a little bit. And then what I'll also do is take the edge of a paper and then Just stepping back a little bit and looking at the photo, you can see that he's got some lines through the middle. So just using the edge of the paper, I'll just spray a dot and a couple more on the sides here. Make sure you use both sides of the paper and come in this direction as well. And that way we can start to establish the texture of our lips. But I think for this painting, and just the part 1 of this video, just establishing the tones and the basic values of the painting, we're going to leave it here and then come back in part 2 and start to actually look at textures and looking at, you know, all the little dots and wrinkles and paint, how to paint those and how to address those, and really start to make this image more realistic. So I hope you followed along and you really enjoyed this and you managed to paint your first portrait.